Welcome back to the In the Court Show. Yes, if you didn't know, the Trump administration has been winning a lot in the court, specifically in the Supreme Court. It was just recently decided that Trump will be allowed to mass deport illegal immigrants who have been designated as terrorists or gangsters. There was a push by the Democrats to stop him from being able to just deport people. And he invoked this old rule from like the 1700s or something like that, that allowed him to classify those illegal immigrants as enemy combatants and to take immediate measures to ship them out of the country. It just seems to be that the Supreme Court sided with him when he was ordered not to do that by a lower level federal court with a Democratic appointed judge. The Supreme Court minimized their power to restrict his ability to deport those people. Let's go ahead and listen in on the news conveying this.
The U.S. Supreme Court has handed President Trump a victory, letting him and his administration use the 1798 law that historically has been employed only in wartime to swiftly deport alleged Venezuelan gang members as part of the Republican president's hardline approach to immigration. Granting that administration request to lift the Washington-based U.S. judge James Boasberg's March 15th order that had temporarily blocked the summary deportations under the Alien Enemy.
We called on the Supreme Court to rein in these activist judges like Judge Boasberg, who was completely out of line in trying to say that the president didn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists off of our soil. We have always maintained the position at the White House that the president was well within his constitutional authority to do so. And this decision proves that President Trump and our administration have always been right.
There you have it. President Trump got the victory. His administration is allowed to deport people. His administration is allowed to also fire federal workers in an effort to reduce the government overspend due to the fact that the federal government is got a lot of wasteful spending going on right now. So there's a lot kind of brewing for the Trump administration, and it seems as if the Supreme Court is siding with him. Now, it is quite clear that some people are using the courts in an effort to hinder Trump from being able to carry out his executive duties. And he is essentially challenging all their efforts and beating them in court. So there we have it.
Breaking news at the Supreme Court. It just handed President Trump another win, allowing his administration to fire hundreds of probationary federal workers. I want to get straight to Paula Reed, who was looking through the decision. Paula, what did they say?
So, Dana, this is a significant win for the administration. The fourth one that they have notched from the Supreme Court in just the past few days. Here, this decision is focused on thousands of fired probationary federal workers. Now, this decision will allow the government to keep those individuals off the payroll, while the larger questions about these firings are litigated. Now, this was decided not on a constitutional issue or really on the merits. It was decided on something called standing, which is whether the individuals who brought this lawsuit had the right to do so. And here the court says that the 9 nonprofit organizations did not have standing in this case. So again, this is sort of a technical win, but it is still a win for the administration, though it's unclear how this will apply to all fired probationary workers, because a separate judge in Maryland earlier this month ordered a pause and a reinstatement of some employees that are not covered by this case. But I do want to say, Dana, the Justice Department, the Trump administration, they've been waiting for a while for good news from the courts after a string of losses, and they have been getting a lot of good news from the high court over the past few days.
Okay, Paula, stand by because I do want to come back to you in a short while about other topics the Supreme Court is dealing with explicitly, immigration. But first, I want to talk about this breaking news with the terrific group of reporters with me today. CNN's Jamie Gangel, Zolan Kano-Youngs of the New York Times, and Leanne Caldwell of Puck. Okay, so transparency, we literally just got this in. We're looking at it right now. We did hear from the great Paula Reed explaining it. Jamie, I'm going to go to the daughter of a judge right now. Not a Supreme Court justice, but she might as well be.
Still very important.
Very important. And I do think, obviously, a win is a win.
Right.
Having said that, this isn't the final word from the Supreme Court on that very crucial question about whether or not the Trump administration has the right to fire the probationary employees as they did.
Correct. So we are going inch by inch, step by step through the courts. It is a win today. Big picture, we're going to have to wait and see. I just want to go, 30,000 feet for a moment and talk about the context of this, though. When you get a ruling like this, and these people have been told that they're not going to get paid when they're on leave, there's a reality. They have to go out and find another job. So at least for most of these people, this is pushing them out of government. It is a brain drain. Probationary employees are not just young people coming in for the first time. They can be extremely experienced. A lawyer for 20 years who's just taken a new job in the government. So, the sources I've talked to across the government are really concerned, once again, that when something like this happens, federal workers are not the enemy. We are losing experience and expertise.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that this isn't just, 20-somethings who just graduated from college and are in for their first job. There are a lot of people who were hired recently from the private sector, many of whom took a big pay cut in order to work in the public sector. And what we are talking about here is about 16,000 people, 16,000 probationary employees who lost their jobs as part of these cuts. I also want to add that there were two liberal justices who publicly dissented, Sonia Mayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yeah, also with probationary workers, sometimes it's also people who just got promotions who were previously in the government or had worked in the government and they were promoted and then lost their jobs because of this. But, when we were hearing about this case before we came on air, this is part of the administration's plan. They knew that there were going to be lawsuits, many of them. They knew that they were going to go through the courts, but they were very confident that the Supreme Court was going to side with them in many cases. And so this is the second day in a row that has happened. And so you have to imagine that the administration is feeling very good right now.
And it's also just part of a broader strategy to make things tougher for the federal workforce as they try to cut the federal bureaucracy and downsize it. That's not just done through putting people on leave, but pursuing actions that make people uncomfortable to the point where they leave voluntarily as well. And you may leave voluntarily if you're not getting paid.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Paula Reed because, as I mentioned, there is another big story out of the high court today. The justices are ruling, in fact, they did so late last night, that the Trump administration can use the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to carry out deportations. Here's what the White House said when it discussed what it is calling a big win for its immigration agenda.
This was a huge, a monumental victory for President Trump, the biggest legal win of this administration so far. This is a monumental, colossal victory for the rule of law, for the Constitution.
It's not quite that simple. The court also set up some guardrails for migrants who want to challenge their deportations. Okay, I now want to go back to Paula Reed to explain what we're talking about with this nuance here. Paula.
Look, Stephen Miller is correct that this is the biggest victory the administration has scored so far when it comes to testing President Trump's expansive use of executive power. But as you noted, this was not a total victory. This was a partial victory because while the Supreme Court sided with the administration, it did place limitations on how they can use these powers, saying that immigrants should get a chance to contest their deportations. So people who are deported should receive notice they are subject to this act and an opportunity to have their removal reviewed by a federal court where they're being detained. And that is significant because one of the reasons they wanted to use the Alien Enemies Act is to speed up deportations. But look, this is undoubtedly a green light for the administration in terms of Trump's expansive use of executive power. Also, this is happening in a case where a federal judge is looking at whether the administration intentionally defied his initial pause on the use of this act. So this is significant. And as Leanne and others were noting, this has always been the long game that Stephen Miller and others at the Justice Department have been playing. They believe that even if they were initially deterred by lower courts, that when these questions eventually got to the justices, that the conservative supermajority would see things their way. And for now, they have the green light to go ahead with this.
Yeah, they do. Paula, thank you so much. And Zelen, you've covered immigration for a while, not to mention the courts, which is really what we're talking about here. What's your take and what's your reporting on this?
So this ruling really was on procedural grounds, basically saying that it was filed in the wrong place. But I think Paula hit the right point where they are saying that they can move forward using the Alien Enemies Act. But the central motivation the administration had to use this act was to deport people without due process, to do it rapidly. And the part of this ruling essentially also says that you need to provide these migrants the chance to actually review this and potentially oppose it, to challenge this too. So now, how does this work? This is a real question. How do you pursue and use an authority that essentially they've been arguing eliminates due process, or at least allows you to deport someone with little to no due process, when the court is actually saying you now need to give that opportunity?
Right, it does
to
seem very
immigrants?
contradictory.
It does. So now how does this play out here as they continue to use this?
I think the answer is what Stephen Miller said. They're just going to do what they want to do.
And then that also, goes to the fact that they've also gotten real close to pushing back against court orders to block some of these flights too, which is something to watch.
So I think very important point, are we going to see them defy the courts? This is something we've been worried about, we've been talking about. On the other hand, while they have declared victory here, I think it is so critical that the due process of this is being stated by the court. Speed has been the weapon of Donald Trump's policy here. This slows it down.
Listen to what Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, said about this morning.
These liberal district judges thought that they could control our entire country's policy, Donald Trump's policy, on keeping America safe. They cannot do it. And this was, again, a landmark ruling for the rule of law yesterday. And it's so important because these flights will now continue. These terrorists, they are foreign terrorists. They are alien enemies to our country, and we will continue to deport them.
Well, it's interesting, just the language that they're all using the word terrorists now. Some of them might be in that category, but we just don't know. She also talked about the rule of law. And if you look at what the Supreme Court decided, she's right. The rule of law should be followed. But the question again is, how do they see the rule of law versus what the Supreme Court said should be the rule of law to follow?
Yeah, and she still can, even though she won this case, partially won this case, she is still criticizing the judge at the first level of the federal process to challenge the case. But the process played out how it's supposed to play out. Starts at the circuit court, to the appeals court, and then to the Supreme Court. And they have been attacking the courts and the judges specifically every step of the way. And that is also part of their plan to undermine the system, undermine the judges. But still, it played out and they've won.
There you have it. So as you can see, it seems like Trump is getting victories in court. He's winning on his ability to fire federal employees in an effort to reduce the size of government. He is winning in his ability to invoke a 1700s act that allows him to classify illegal immigrants who are criminals as enemy combatants and then to take immediate processes to deport them. And he's winning in other areas as well. So the Trump administration is on a high cloud right now, if you will. But at the same time, there are some questions that are posed. It is true if someone gets picked up and is classified as an illegal immigrant simply because maybe they had tattoos or something, they got picked up in a sting operation. There is no real due process that these people get to defend themselves, to say, hey, wait, I'm not affiliated with this gang. I may be a Hispanic person. I may be, I may look this way, but I'm not affiliated with that. So I do think that there does need to be some measures put into place to allow people to at least defend themselves when you're making allegations that they are associated with a gang or they need to be shipped out. And it seems like there's a fine line set that allows people to have due process, but at the same time, too, it allows the administration to move expeditiously to get those people out of the country that they deem to be a threat to the country. So it's a positive for Trump, and he can continue to sort of manage without being hindered by liberal courts, judges, federal court judges, who somehow feel that they can impose him from carrying out his executive duties. So this, I think, is telling of what's to come on a lot of other challenges that was put into place with regards to him stopping wasteful spending, with regards to a number of other things. I think Trump will end up being victorious in these areas as well.